Welcome to ERTT Radio. I'm your host, Mike Dibble. Well, if you've been paying attention to the news lately, you've probably been hearing about this nuclear option, the huge Senate rule that they are trying to change. Now, pretty much the nuclear option is their way of using their scare tactic words to describe what most Americans that have followed history would understand as the filibuster. Now, the filibuster, basic synopsis, is a bill would be pushed to the Senate floor, there'd be a discussion, and they'd want to push a vote on it. Well, the side that has the minority that wouldn't be able to stop this bill, what they would do is they would filibuster. A senator would stand up and they would talk for hours or days, depending on how long they could stand there and talk, and they would not yield the floor up. And that would prevent the other side from pushing through their bill. Pretty much it would put a stop to any business in the Senate just to prevent this bill from coming out. If it was so bad or they were so against it and they didn't have the power to stop it with the votes, this is how they would end it. They would just filibuster. Now, later years, the 80s and 90s, most of the time you could just threaten to filibuster. And they would try to rework things, try to, throw in earmarks or something to get enough votes to keep them from filibustering. So that's pretty much the history and the synopsis of the filibuster. During the Bush era, the Republicans were wanting to push some of the Bush nominees for the Supreme Court. The Democrats were filibustering. They were stopping these guys from getting in. Well, the Republicans came up with this idea they called the nuclear option to pretty much end the filibuster. For those of you who understand our government system, in the House, they don't have this power. There is no filibuster in the House. So they have pretty much set times, and they can't do this. The Senate was able to filibuster. Well, because all those nominees for the Supreme Court were going through and being stopped. They came up with this idea of passing a new change. Pretty much rewrite the idea of the Constitution on this filibuster, because they wanted to pass the Democrats to stop them from filibustering to get these nominees through. Well, it didn't happen because they figured out, well, that is a pretty bad idea. And it is, because what will happen is, let's say, like is now, the Senate is run by the Democrats. Now the power is switched. So you may have had this great idea of giving yourself more power to push through your nominees, your bills, whatever, and stuff the opposition. Well, political winds change, people's votes change, who gets elected changes. Well, now you don't have the power. You don't have the majority. Well, now you have severely weakened yourself because they now have more power than you do, than they used to have. So this whole nuclear option of getting rid of the filibuster was bad. Straight up bad idea. But now it's being talked about because the Democrats want to do the exact same thing, which in the long run could come back once again and bite them in the butt. It's a bad idea all around. It's not something that should be changed. Even though there are reasons why, whichever side you're on, whichever side you're for, when you have the power, you want to be able to pass your bills, what you believe in, what you want to have passed, what's going to be best for your constituency. Well, when you don't have the power, you want to stop. You don't have the power to push through anything. You want to stop the opposition from doing anything. Well, if you gave yourself more power and prevented the other side from stopping you, when the shoe's on the other foot, you're going to have the exact same problem. So I am more of a strict constitutionalist, if you could call me that. The Constitution was written for a reason, and it was to chain the government down, because otherwise they get out of control. You get people with power, people with money, people with a sense of I don't know, pride, nobility, or just people just wanting to help that become misguided and bad things start to happen. So the Constitution is there to stop this, to keep things in check, because otherwise your Senate is just going to run away with whatever policies they want to put in. And then what's going to happen when the flip side, the other side, the Republican side, whatever, gets in power, they're going to want to do the exact same thing. That is why the filibuster is there. It is to stop some of this. And it also makes a huge separation between the houses. You have the Senate and the House of Representatives, the two sides of Congress. Congress is designed, was created to make the laws. They are called the legislative branch for that reason. They are legislating, and they are directly responsible to the states from which they come from. Now, we'll talk a little bit about the House. So some of you may not know all this, so I want to delve into some of the government aspects of this. We'll start with the Senate. Okay, senators. In order to become a senator, you have to be the age of 30. For a representative, you would only have to be an age of 25. I think Senate being smaller, size is only 100. That the senator needs to be older, more mature, I guess would be the idea behind that, in order to take the spot of a senator. Now, their terms are also different from that of the representatives. Now, for a senator, it's 6 years. For the president, it is 4. And for a representative, it is 2 years. So a senator has a longer time in office. Now, there's also not as many of them. When they're coming up with the how they wanted to do the Congress, there was 2 schools of thought. The first thought was that everybody should have equal representation. So they came up with the idea of the Senate. Every state has the exact same number of votes. So the state of California will have 2 votes, the state of Texas will have 2 votes, and the state of Rhode Island will have 2 votes. So everybody is equal no matter how big your population was. So they created some balance with the Senate. That was the original intent. Now, the other school of thought when they were developing the Congress was that you needed to have some representation based on the amount of people that you had. You had the state of, I guess it would be more Virginia at that time, Maryland, some of the bigger populations versus like Rhode Island. Well, you wanted more power for those states that had more people because more of them were being represented. The House of Representatives is based on the population of the state, not an even distribution. So the state of Alaska isn't going to have the same amount of votes as California based on people size. So that is one major difference between the House and the Senate. Another is the term. As I said, representatives have a 2-year term. And what they try to do is for the states is they separate your Senate terms and your House terms. So one senator during election year, which is pretty much every 2 years, you won't have all your senators and all your representatives changed all at the same time. And that is a good thing, because otherwise you'll have massive swings in the way the government works. Okay, let's say on one election cycle, there's a lot of liberals move in, to the cities or whatever, and in one state there's a lot of liberals that are voting. Well, if everybody is going to get changed at the exact same time, all your senators, all your House of Representatives, and the president gets voted on all at the exact same time, then you're going to have the entire government flip-flop from one side to the other. So what they do is they stagger it and say your representative will be this term. One senator will be the next 2 years. Then another senator will be the next 2 years. So it's staggered out. So the huge fluctuations in government don't happen. Another thing with the House is the age, 25. So as soon as you hit 25, you can run for House of Representatives. I could now run as a representative if I wanted to. Part of that is they wanted, since the House represented the population, there was a lot of younger people to be represented. So they wanted the age limit not as high as the Senate and not as high as the President to be able to represent both the older age groups, which would be more of the Senate, but there are older representatives as well, but to also represent the younger people with a younger age. And the House being a shorter term, you can get rid of people faster. And the vote doesn't mean as much. And here's why I say that. The size of the House of Representatives is 435 representatives. So your vote, okay, let's say you're the only representative for your state, which I think Alaska only has one representative. I'm not positive. So you have your one vote. Well, you're representing the state of Alaska with your one vote. So you're representing all of Alaska with your House vote. However, compared to all the other states, your vote doesn't mean that much, since there's another 434 individuals that are also voting. So your vote means 1 out of 435. So you're at about 0.25% voting for whatever you vote for, versus the Senate. Since there's only 100 senators, your vote is 1%. You get 5 or 6 senators to go along with you, that's a huge chunk of vote versus a representative. Something else that's different between the House of Representatives and the Senate. And this ties a little bit into the Obamacare, which I know is still big in the news now. The House, according to the Constitution, and I will read it verbatim for you. Okay. According to the Constitution, in Article 1, Section 7, all bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives, but the Senate may propose or concur with amendments as on other bills. So, the Senate can propose their great ideas, but it has to start in the House. Now, why is that? Well, the representatives have a shorter term. They get changed out faster. And if you start voting up higher taxes, you are closer to getting removed by the people to get that changed back. Now, the Obamacare, that didn't originate in the House. That originated in the Senate. Now, this is what I talk about when the different branches do not do their jobs. Being that Obamacare is a tax, you can debate the Obamacare, the healthcare law, till you're blue in the face. But the bottom line with it is that it raised taxes. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's a huge price tag on this. You can debate how much it is, the changes of this or that, but it increased taxes. It also increased the budget, too. So you could argue quite easily that this bill was a taxing bill. Instantly, if the judicial branch was doing its job, would make this bill unconstitutional. Because it did not originate where it was supposed to. And according to Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution of the United States, it says that the House of Representatives have to originate this bill. It has to start in the House. Why didn't it start in the House? Well, the House wasn't run by the Democrats. We have a Democratic president, obviously. The Senate has been run by the Democrats quite definitively over the past several years. So they started this in the Senate, which technically should have been stopped, but it was ramrodded through. They stirred up enough of the people saying, oh, everyone needs health care, everyone needs this, everyone needs that, and it sounded good. Okay, I don't mind anybody having health care. I really don't. But I don't want to pay for somebody else to have something that they didn't work for. There are thousands and thousands of charities out there And one of the beautiful things about the healthcare is that if you had a catastrophic injury and you went to the hospital, they would see you. They would stabilize you. They wouldn't just, pick you up in an ambulance, drive you to the emergency room, look at you, and say, "Oh, you don't have health insurance? Okay, well, we're just going to leave you. You bleed to death on the table and die." I don't know who comes up with that idea, but it is not true. That does not happen in the United States. So this whole healthcare thing was a little bit blown out of proportion. So before I get too far on that tangent, back to the tax bills. They're supposed to originate in the House. And thousands and thousands of pages worth of bill that definitely raised taxes should have started in the House, and it didn't. And the Supreme Court, which is a very interesting body, when you're in the Supreme Court, you are there for life. Till you die, you're in the Supreme Court. So some of these people have been in there for years and years and years. And some of President Obama's nominees were, I will say, poor at best. The idea of the Supreme Court, yes, you want to put people in there that have your same ideas. But the job of the Supreme Court is to determine if laws are constitutional or not. And with Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act, if you want to get specific to the bill, is a tax on the American people. Should have been labeled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. But what happened is the legislative branch overstepped their bounds, their authority, passed this. Like most bills that are passed by the same political party as the president, they normally instantly get signed. And because of that, the healthcare bill was passed. The Supreme Court was challenged on this to call it unconstitutional. So they had an opportunity, but they just let it go. And now it's this part of the supreme law of the land. So back to the legislative side of things. There is a balance between the Senate and the House and the different bills that they pass. Some more about Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution. Every bill which shall have passed the House of Representatives and the Senate shall, before it becomes law, be presented to the President of the United States. And if he approves, I'm paraphrasing now, if he approves, he'll sign it. If not, he'll return it with his objections to the House in which it originated. So, pretty much, the bill will go to the President. If he doesn't like it, the House that started the bill, not the last House it was in, because what happens with a bill, for those of you who are not overly familiar with the political process, let's say it's a tax bill. I want to tax green peas. Green peas need a 10-cent tax, period. Just any green pea needs a tax. Those of you who don't like green peas would love me. My wife does not like peas, so I'm throwing out peas. Well, I start the bill in the House. We come up with the therefores and thens and all the fancy wording to basically tax peas. An extra 10% tax for peas. Well, we vote on it, we approve it, and it goes over to the Senate. Now the Senate looks at it, they don't like it. They're like, well, we like green beans, but we'll agree with your peas, so we'll make an exception for green beans and just unshelled peas, green peas. So they'll make their changes, they'll vote on it, and we like it this way. Well, since there were changes on the bill, it has to go back to the House because the House didn't sign off on that original Senate bill. They signed off on the bill they pushed over to the Senate. Okay, let's say the Senate was drawn out 50-50. They can't make up their mind on this bill. Well, here's why a vice president is very important. Vice President Biden isn't exactly the most loved of vice presidents. Many people make fun of him for pretty much sticking his foot in his mouth. But what a lot of people don't know is that he decides over all the ties in the Senate. So if 50% of the Senate says, we like this green peas, and the other said, no, we need to tax them 10% or 10 cents. Well, the vice president is the Speaker of the Senate, and he makes, with that deadlock, he makes that final vote. So he makes it 51-50. Well, now the bill passes, goes back to the House, and we look at it. Well, we don't like some of those changes, but some of the other guys do. We get more people on board. Some people switch sides. Or use the McCain expression, we reach across the aisle, and we'll push for it anyway. We'll add those extra changes. So we sign off on it with no changes, the bill as is. Well, that bill then goes up to the president, and the president can determine, like it says in Section 7, if he approves, he'll sign it. Now, being this bill was a tax bill, and he agrees with it, and it was pushed by his party, and pretty much the president is the leader of his party at that time, he signs off on it. Otherwise, if he doesn't like it, either it better be completely against his beliefs, or pretty much pushed by a fringe portion of his party, because if most of his party liked that bill and pushed it through, and he says no, he's pretty much dooming his chances at re-election. He's also hurting the continuity of his party. So a lot of times the president, well, pretty much it's a no think about signature a lot of times when your party passes something and it goes to the president for signature. So let's just say the president liked it, he signed it. Now it's law. But that's not where it stops. The Supreme Court could look at it and be like, wait a minute. Taxing green peas is illegal. It does not line up. Taxing green peas does not line up with the Constitution. It is unconstitutional. And when they label it unconstitutional, it's gone. The bill is done. Despite it having all those signatures, it's done. So, the Supreme Court has some significant power. It also keeps some of those laws, or it should keep some of those laws, that are harmful to the American people, to our form of government, from being passed at all. Well, let's just say the president looked at it, at that bill, and decided not to sign it. He doesn't think it's good for the American people either. Well, it goes back to Congress. Now, Congress can override his veto. Okay? Here's what it says later on in Section 7. Every order, resolution, or vote to which the concurrence of the Senate and the House of Representatives may be necessary, except on a question of adjournment, shall be presented to the President of the United States, and before the same shall take effect, shall be approved by him or be disapproved by him, shall be repassed by 2/3 of the Senate and House of Representatives according to the rules and limitations prescribed in the case of the bill. So, what that means is, say the president didn't like it, he vetoes it, because he has the power to do so. If it goes back and the House and the Senate both love this bill to death, and both sides, both Democrats and Republicans, because you have to have a 2/3. Well, for the Senate, you would have to have a 67 vote, because that is, out of 100, 100 doesn't divide evenly by 3, so it's 67. That would be your 2/3 majority vote. Now, for the House, that's a lot more people you've got to get on board with this thing. 435. Out of 435 people, you would need 290 to get that 2/3 majority vote. So that is a significant amount of people that are voting for this. And a lot of times, they wrote this in the Constitution pretty much to stop abuse of power. And it is very hard to get 2/3 of both the House and the Senate to agree on anything. There's been a few occasions where that has happened, and that is a lot of power when it's wielded. especially if you have the Supreme Court. If most of the justices, if they are from the political party that is in power in the president and the legislative branch, that's all three branches aligned politically. Now, whether it's your party or not, that is a lot of power that is wielded all at once. And even some of the best intentions, whichever way you vote, that's pretty scary, because things can be suddenly flipped around in the country that might not be a good thing. Now, most of you know on this radio program, you could probably label me a conservative, or in some cases you could probably even label me a libertarian, because I believe in freedom first. Well, even if everything I believed in, and they all had that massive amount of power all at once, that would still alarm me, because it wouldn't take much for that power to be abused really quickly, which is why when they put it in the Constitution and they split it up like this, they did it so one group couldn't control everything, which is very, very insightful of the Founding Fathers to come up with a form of government that spread things out like this. Think of some other forms of government. You have the constitutional monarchy of the United Kingdom, even though the Queen is pretty much a figurehead and doesn't have the great power that she once had. That is still an individual that is pretty much leads the country by birth, not by the political system we have where we vote for our top leader every 4 years. So they are a little different when it comes to that. And they also have their parliament, one big body of people. And they operate, I've always been fascinated with the way the British do things. They are very blunt in their deliberations in the Parliament. If you ever have a chance to watch the British political system in work, I would definitely encourage you to do so, because that is something that's pretty radical, if you want to use the word, in compared to how we do things here in the United States. But they have a different system than we do. Think they do have a prime minister, which is elected, so they have something of a type of president that we do. You have all different kinds of political systems. Some of them have a body. I mentioned in one of my news articles about the Afghanistan, their version of a parliament, is voting on the peace pact treaty, security pact that we've come up with. But their leaders are elected different than ours. So when the Founding Fathers, when they created our political infrastructure from scratch, they looked at all the different governmental systems throughout history. And they came up with this because they saw, and I'm probably going to step on some toes here that listen to this, because I know some friends that believe differently. But man is not basically good. And the Founding Fathers knew this. Man, when he is left to his own devices to do whatever he wants, and he's given absolute power, what happens? The old saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it is true. Why is that? Is it because man is basically good? No. Man is not basically good. Man is basically evil. He will turn when he has an opportunity. When he has the opportunity to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, however he wants, he will do it. Why are there laws? There are laws to keep people like that in line. So when the Founding Fathers made our system, they knew absolute power would destroy the country, and they would be no better than the system they had just left, where the king taxed without representation. He ordered quartering in the homes without permission. To put it on our level, the military, this is an amendment, by the way, quartering of soldiers in homes is not allowed without the permission of the owner. So in England, a soldier could just, okay, you're staying with these people. Do they have a say? No, but you're staying with these people. Well, the Third Amendment says no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. That is the Third Amendment. Founding Fathers knew there was abuse of power, and it was going to happen. So the Constitution, you can view the Constitution as chains. It was to bind the government down, to keep it from coming out of control. Why? Because man seeks power. If you remember my quote from the last episode, the greatest threat to our freedom is a man seeking power. And if you look anywhere at Washington, you will see a lot of bimbos seeking power. And yes, I said bimbos. There are a few, not many, that actually seek good and freedom, but there's not a lot. And that's why this filibuster thing is important. Why do I care what goes on up there? Because without the filibuster, the good people who are seeking more of our freedoms, to preserve our freedoms, which you should all be concerned about. Every law that is passed takes something away, or it restricts something. I am of the mindset that you should have maximum freedom all the time. My saying is maximum freedom with maximum responsibility, defended by maximum courage. You should have the most freedom you could possibly have, but you should be responsible for that freedom. Now, being responsible for the freedom you have now, voting, that is a responsibility you are given as a U.S. citizen, and you need to vote responsibly. Now, you have the right to vote. Now, everyone encourages people to vote. If you are not going to vote responsibly, I do not want you to vote. If you're going to vote somebody based on the color of their skin, I don't want you to vote. If you're going to vote for someone based on how much he's promised to give you, I don't want you to vote. If you are going to vote for somebody based on his ethnic background, then just vote for him based on that. I don't want you to vote. Because that is not being responsible for the freedom you have of voting. And there are countries that you don't have that freedom to vote. When you go hand in your ballot, somebody looks at it, and they know exactly who you voted for. And then there are people outside that'll take care of you if you didn't vote for who you're supposed to vote for. Yes, it happens. Don't believe me? Look it up. It happens. We have a secret ballot where people don't see who you vote for. And it is illegal for somebody, this is one of the things when they were election back in Al Gore when they were doing the recall, and said, well, we should go to people's houses because of all the hanging chads, and we should ask them who they voted for. Not legal. Because you have the privacy to vote without any reprisals, which is why it's secret. Because you give people too much power, and they're going to want to get rid of people who are in their way. So, if you are not going to be responsible when you vote, I don't want you to vote. Now, if you believe in bigger government, and you believe that everyone should have health care, that everyone should have this or that, and you vote for President Obama, for example, I'll disagree with you wholeheartedly. But you are voting based on what you believe in, not based on something shallow. That, he's black, or I voted for the white guy, or I voted for the first woman because she's a woman. That's not voting responsibly. That's voting on something very shallow. The person could destroy this country based on your foolishness. So, the maximum freedom, maximum responsibility. You need to exercise the freedoms that you have. Voting would be one of them. Vote responsibly when you do so. Second Amendment, obviously being an amendment I am for, and I talk about quite a bit, exercising that. Buy yourself a gun. Be responsible. Don't go out, buy a gun, and shoot up your local convenience store. Not responsible. Be responsible. And you need to defend your freedoms with maximum courage. So, it comes down to our radio show. Why am I doing this show? I'm doing this show because I'm trying to defend our freedom. There's different ways to do it. There are those who put on a uniform and fight throughout the world to defend our freedom. There are those who put on a suit and tie every day and go and battle the forces that would destroy this country sitting in Congress. Oh, and if you don't think there's people who want to destroy this country, you are sadly mistaken. Okay, what can I do to defend my country? You don't have to join the military, although there are members that listen to this radio show that do. I support you in that endeavor. But you can defend your freedoms by keeping people informed, which is why this radio show exists, is to keep people informed on what is actually going on and what people need to know about our political systems, about the freedoms they have, and things that they need to do about it. So this is my way of defending our freedom. What's yours? If you don't have one, you'd like some suggestions? Email me, ask. I can give you some ideas. Those who are defending our freedom, whether in uniform, out of uniform, doing their job, going out of their way to exercise their freedoms, to tell other peoples the freedoms they have, and to keep people informed of the truth, my hat is off to you. So, bottom line about the filibuster, keep it. Keep the filibuster. It will keep our freedoms more intact longer than if we get rid of it. And I would urge you to contact your congressman or senator, whichever state you're in, and let them know to keep the filibuster. Do not change it. It was there for a reason, and it needs to stay. We want to stay free. Well, that's all we have time for here today, folks. I thank you so much for joining us here on the program. And if you have any comments or suggestions, things you'd like to talk about, me to talk about on the radio program, just shoot me an email at miked@erttradio.com. And as always, maximum freedom, maximum responsibility. Defend your freedoms with maximum courage. Live free and die free.